going to, now we're going to move into what I call the rapid fire segment. The rapid fire segment of the Jazz Piano Skills.
Yeah, suddenly we have technical problems because I don't want to answer a question. Oh, can't hear you.
So, right. So the rapid fire session here, I'm going to throw out some musical terms, some musical skills, and I want you to, as succinctly and concisely as possible, speak to the students, the Jazz Piano Skills listeners, and kind of give them your do's and your don'ts with regards to this particular topic or skills.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to start. I would say I'm going to start easy, but it's not easy. I'm just going to throw it out. Scales. Everybody talks about scales. So Bert Ligon, what are your do's and don'ts?
I figured that's a great place to start. I don't think I could play an instrument without learning scales, because if we go back to what we're really trying to do, we're trying to play melodies, and you can only play melodies either with steps or with leaps. So that indicates at some point I'm going to need to practice steps, which are scales, and leaps, which are arpeggios. So it's fundamental. So you can't get, that's like that basic baseball skill. You got to practice that.
Got to do it, man.
You cannot do, though, here's the do's and the don'ts. What you cannot do is think that is studying harmony or that is studying melodic development. It is kind of like just the spice rack, and certainly you have to know it. So I spent years practicing scales, and I'll admit that I don't practice scales at all anymore, but I do practice arpeggios. And when I practice arpeggios, I connect the arpeggiated notes with passing tones. And to me, I think that may be even a better way to think of scales.
All right.
Is to think of them as like a way to get to the arpeggiated notes.
Right.
So
yeah, got it. Right.
Is this coming across?
It is coming across. Yes.
That's a Beethoven theme from a cello piano tree, I think. Well, that's a scale, but it's landing on that's his way of saying this. Then here's another piece that everybody knows. Some people
I was just going to say that.
They're going to hear that as a scale, but it really is. We'll edit out my singing.
Right.
But so then I want to really think about scales then as a way to get to these points. So here's my Google Maps thing. I'm trying to get from here to here.
Right.
The important thing is my starting point and my end point. And I can choose a scenic route. I can take the freeways or whatever. That's the scales or arpeggios, possible analogy. And I'm shooting from the hip here. But too many people start thinking that every chord symbol or everything has to do with playing a scale, when it would be better to think maybe, what is the one note I want to play here?
Correct.
And then use scales and arpeggios to get there. But fundamentally, you have to play scales to work out issues of what the hands do with the piano. And the hands are symmetrical, and so is the piano, And,
right. And I always talk to students about scales, practicing scales with always an intentional entry point and an intentional destination point. Everybody wants to practice scales from the root to the root, and I'm always like, no, I don't want you to go root to root. How about root to 7, or how about 3rd to 9, or how about 5th to, how about some kind of entry point, some destination point, and then what arpeggio coincides with that,
Right. Yeah, so, I think, and the way we teach scales in classes and in piano lessons, everything is this root to root thing, because it's easy to talk about it that way. But most melodies don't start.
Well, that's exactly right. And
I mean, those two that I just played did, but you think about just little folk songs like that. They a lot of times start on the 5 or the national anthem or some of these things. So yeah, practicing from some melodic intent point.
Yeah, and plus I think that if you're always practicing the scale from the root to the root, you're doing such a disservice to the ear, right? How about if I practice from the root to the 7th, I'm listening for that 7th. If I'm practicing something to from the 5th to the 9th, I'm listening for the 5th to the 9th. My ears are starting to hear these relationships.
Well, someone asked me the other day, another college teacher, about, I think we were talking about some melodic minor arpeggio stuff, which it's maybe too deep for this conversation, but the point, he was asking me, how do I have them practice it for this tune? And I say, I have them practice the arpeggios from the melody note in every measure,
Yeah.
instead of going,
Right.
okay, this is
Right.
a such and such chord, so I'm going to play from root to root. No, find the melody note and then frame it with the
Correct.
arpeggio and or the scale, because then that's what, if we call, let's say Stella, and we're calling Stella because it's a beautiful melody and we want to hear that melody. So I practice any kind of scale motion or arpeggio motion from that rather than
Right.
root to root. That's not my job.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
not what I hear when I hear any tune. I don't hear root to root. I hear the melody,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And yet as musicians, sometimes we get so skewed, what's that tune? And the piano player will start hollering off a bunch of chord changes. The bass player is thinking boom, root fifths, and anybody else in the world, they're thinking of the lyrics and the melody.
That's
And,
right.
and so
Oh,
I go back to that a lot. So that's my thing on scales. I won't go any further. Yeah.
yeah, that's very good. All right, here's another topic that I think is, in my opinion, I think is probably the most complicated or confusing skill set for any aspiring jazz pianist. Everybody seems to struggle with the concept of voicings.
Hmm.
What are voicings? What are good voicings? How should you practice voicing? So that what happens to help students, so that voicings, I always say, if you're not careful, voicings can become like fishing line. They can get tangled up real quickly. So, what is your advice, do's and don'ts for students as they approach the study of voicings?
Okay. When I first started figuring out voicings, and I didn't have formulas, and I didn't have any books, and I didn't have anybody telling me these are the good voicings. But when I would find one that I thought worked, and looking back, most of them did,
All right.
I was approaching it as, uh, if there was a 5 note chord, I looked at that as 5 voices.
Right.
And I listened to every voice as it went through. So even if I'm just talking about a left hand, that top note really is a beautiful line.
Right.
Now,
Right.
where the ear, I can play these for my students in a class that don't know anything about theory and they're not thinking theory, but they can sing the next note because it's a logical, it
Right.
goes where it should go. So while I was
Right.
playing voicings and practicing a 2/5 cycle or whatever cycle I'd figured out, I would have to practice it several times to get my fingers to play in the right spot, right? Like we all do. We have to practice many times. You can't just do it
Correct.
once and think
Muscle
I got
memory.
it.
Right.
And then I would take it to the new keys. But what I would do is I would play this cycle 5 times in this key. And every time I would sing one of the voices. So
Ah.
that I wasn't just playing an F down here with my thumb. I was singing the F and hearing how it eventually
Wow.
resolved to the E.
Very good. Right.
And then I would do the same thing. I'm thinking about like those are 5 voices. And instead of thinking chunk, 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 I'm thinking 5 individual linear motions.
Correct.
And I
Right.
didn't know that this was a good thing. Now looking back, I think, man, that's a great thing to do. Because when I play piano today, I'm still trying to hear those as 5 individuals that have linear implications. Every time I play a note, it has a linear implication in this context. And so,
Yeah. So nothing's secondary.
right,
It's all important.
right. And
Yeah.
and they if they are pointing somewhere, then the listener is expecting it. And I can prove that. I can go out to a middle school in the middle of Kansas, and these kids will know where that note's going to go because there's a
Right.
certain inevitability about it.
Right.
And if I want to go someplace else, I have to realize that I am playing with someone's expectations. And that may be
Right.
exactly what I want to do,
Right.
is do that against the grain thing. But for me, it starts with there's 5 lines going on.
Yeah. Right. Wow.
And so, you know, no matter what I'm doing, whatever starting point I am, now, there's a lot of stuff going on there. That was that example of like, maybe those notes weren't where you expect them to go, but then each one of them in turn has an inevitability. So, I
Right.
mean, if we were really going to talk specifics, I mean, I could get down to where I start, close, open, left
Right.
hand, this, that,
Right.
and the other. But at the whole time, I'm trying to hear lines. And when I'm accompanying myself with a solo, I'm still thinking about these as lines, even if I'm
Yeah.
only playing 2 or 3 notes down
R-
here.
right. Right.
Um, so,
Yeah.
and not
It's
just, oh, I stab, here's a shell I throw down on the piano. I mean, they are shells and I am throwing down on the piano, but I'm still trying to be aware of them, how they fit into the musical line and how they coordinate with, um, whatever else is going
right.
on.
Right.
So I don't know if I addressed specifically voicings questions, but you
Yeah.
know,
No. And then practicing them though, when you do find like the muscle memory, right?
mhm,
Repetition, 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 going back to like the baseball drills again,
right,
right? You have to play these, what I call, I tell students all the time, we play shapes and sounds,
mhm,
shapes and
right,
sounds. So be
right,
aware of the shapes, be aware of the sounds,
yeah, yeah.
right? So,
And
oh,
go ahead.
you have another comment on that?
I
No.
probably will,
Okay.
but
All right. So here's another topic. This is every student wants to know this. What are some do's and don'ts about approaching tune study, practicing tunes, working on developing repertoire as a jazz player?
that's a great one. There's 1,000 lists online you can find of standards that everybody should know, and
Right.
they overlap and stuff, and we can figure out what they are. But so start with those. If you don't know some of those top 10 tunes, you start with those. If you're going to jam sessions and you hear people call a tune that you don't know, by tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, you should know the tune. And I'd be surprised how many kids will come out to a jam session and a pretty standard tune is called, and the next week they still don't know the tune. I don't understand what they're thinking.
Yeah.
I
Why
mean,
didn't
that
you?
never happened with me. I
Right.
was like so embarrassed that I didn't know every tune that was called.
Right.
So um,
Yeah.
I don't want to lose track of what I'm trying to get to here.
Well, when you think about that, I'll tell you a story. I remember in college, I went to a jam session with these old jazzers, and the room was packed. It was crowded, all kinds of folks there. In fact, it was in Davenport, Iowa, and it was the Bix Beiderbecke Jazz Festival. So there was all these musicians and all these people, and I'm on the piano, and the sax player turns around and he says, he's counting. He's like, one, this ridiculous tempo, and he says, "Lady Be Good, 1, 3," and I'm on the piano, and I go, Jack, Jack, Jack. I, 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 I don't know it. And he goes, you do now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
do
that's
now.
really how I learned a lot of tunes is on gigs. And if the singer called a tune and the bass player looked like he knew it, I
Right.
figured I have the melody, I have the
Right.
bass note. And if I
Yes.
can't figure out the chord, I shouldn't be up here. And so
Correct.
I would pretend I knew tunes that I didn't.
Right.
And then I would learn them. And usually they're maybe like one chord or like, where does it go for the bridge? What the heck is going on here? And
Right.
I'd figure out that the second time and I'd be watching the bass player really tuning in. And then there'd be some point where they come and the melody lands on a fifth and he's on a root. I'm going, I don't know if it's major or minor. And I would play these ambiguous, where, where if it was supposed to be an F sharp in there, they would hear it. And if it's supposed to be an F natural, they'd hear it. And then I'd wait for the bass moved and I'd go, oh, it was major.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Right.
maybe it was.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so
But how do you approach when you
other
okay?
way
So
to
okay, you're at a jam session. Somebody calls a tune, you don't know it. You go home. You go. I'm going to know this tune by 8 o'clock tomorrow night. What steps do you take to have that tune under your fingers by 8 o'clock tomorrow night?
yeah, I think a lot of people are worrying about the chord changes and how can
Right.
I memorize the chord changes? And uh, you play music by this long and you know that chord changes are kind of liquid anyway. Nobody
Right.
has a lot of changes work to a tune, but here's the thing. All the good ones work with the melody, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if you know the melody,
Right.
that's the thing. And
Right.
and even kids, even this week, somebody's brought in a great tune and they didn't really know the melody. They've kind of half learned the melody and done something that might have been interesting. What in the melody? This is a Victor Young tune. He doesn't need to be fixed, you know.
Right.
Right? You know. So just learn it. In fact, this
Right.
just
Oh.
and if you can learn the lyrics too, it helps because then it's not an abstract. It's not it's an A flat. No, it's a word.
Right.
It's the days. It could be it's
Right. Right.
um, and then the chords. I mean, yeah, so I would have people play the tune as simply as possible for one,
Right.
until, and not trying to do too many cute things with it until they really have the melody learned. And with as the
Amen.
students are more and more advanced, when
Right.
we learn a new tune, like a kid comes into my office and I ask them if they know this tune, and they go, "No, I don't know the tune." Well, let's play it in about 4 or 5 keys, you know. And this is a jazz level student. I mean, a college level student, and we play it in, sometimes up to 12 keys depending on the situation, how
Right.
much time we have,
Right.
because then they're learning the shape of the melody and
Right.
not the Days of Wine and Roses starts on C and goes to A. No, it doesn't. It only works that way if you're playing in the key of F, right?
Right.
If I'm playing,
Right.
if I'm playing in B major, it's a whole different thing, you know.
Right. Right.
So by playing a simple melody, simply in as many keys as you can, or several keys. You don't have to play 12 all the time, but it really helps you learn the piano and learn the melody, because if I'm playing a tune and the first thing I'm going to do is play it in 12 keys,
Right.
by the time I've done that, I really know the melody. I've played it
Right.
12 times in relationships and not
Yeah.
just in the key of
Yeah.
F or the key of D.
In, in,
Um,
in fact, I try to encourage pianists play the melody, and will you please just sit on your left hand? Will you just
mhm.
please just sit on? I want you. Can you please just think like a horn player for a second? Can you
Yeah,
think like a vocalist
yeah,
for a second? And just
yeah.
can you just play the just let's just play the melody. Here's the key. Let's play the melody. Let's not even worry about chord changes. Can we play the melody?
That's a great, and I completely concur with that. And I also, when we first start improvising on this new tune, it's like, I don't want to hear any jazz stuff. I want you to
Right.
improvise on the melody. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Right. How about improvise with the notes of the melody?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So you can disguise it like, it's still in there somewhere, but
Absolutely.
we're not just playing licks or
Right. Right.
randomness.
Exactly right. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny. I heard toward the end of his life, Dave McKenna in an interview. Always enjoyed Dave McKenna's playing because, like Dave McKenna says, the melody's never too far away.
Mhm.
It's always there, right? But I liked what in the end, he said to the interviewer. The interviewer was referring to him as a jazz pianist, and he told him to stop calling him a jazz pianist. And the interviewer said, "Well, what should I call you?" And Dave McKenna said, at this point in my life, I like to think of myself. I'm a song player. I play songs,
Yeah,
melodies.
yeah, yeah,
I play melodies,
yeah.
right? I thought, wow, how fabulous, right?
I still, I still feel like that's motivating me when I'm even on a gig, not just in a classroom, but just on a gig. I've always got the melody under my fingers and
Right.
everything. And sometimes even when I'm off into my cool stuff, I realize that I'm landing on the melody note every time.
Correct.
So I'm
I mean,
still trying to frame it.
when you know the melody, you can. Here's what's funny, right? If you really know the melody, then the challenge is if somebody said to you, "Okay, now play and don't reference the melody," you'd go like this: "Impossible! I can't do
Yeah.
that." It
Yep.
it become hard to not you can't help but to reference it when you know it.
Right. Right.
So it becomes it becomes very obvious. I think when you listen to somebody improvising or playing, it becomes very obvious that they don't know the melody.
Right.
Right?
That is, or if they're, yes, or if they're just thinking, they're really just thinking of a bunch of chord changes. Like I
Right.
have stuff that I can do over F minor to B flat 7 to E flat.
Right.
Well, the, this tune and this tune are different characters, and we're at a different part in the set. And so why play the
Right.
same stuff,
Right. Yeah.
like,
Right. That's right. That's exactly right.
but we all know, and we've probably all been there too, like at the point where we can't wait for the tune to be over so we can just start playing jazz or something. And then
Right.
now the old guys going, yeah, but let's, why do we call this tune if we're just gonna
Right. Right.
blow
So
stuff over?
okay, here's another topic to hit. Another toughie, right? Uh, do's and don'ts for a student starting off and wanting to develop their ear training. Do's and don'ts of ear training.
All right, can you see this thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know. I know. You just think I lost my mind. That's where I have them start. All right.
Nice.
Because that's physics. These notes come out of the air. So it's kind of out of tune, but those are the notes that came out of the tube. So this is the fundamental, and those are the notes. And
Yeah.
so many songs start like that. Days of Wine and Rose. They're all right here, right? Like I could be sitting here just playing over and over and over again. I'm not playing scales. I'm playing the notes out of a
Right.
tube that I got at Lowe's or Home Depot. I can't remember.
Right. Right. Doesn't matter.
So all the other notes that I'm using are notes that point back to these notes, right?
Yeah.
And if
Very good.
So what is that? Simple gifts?
Yeah. Right. So, right.
There's Parker. So I
There you
played
go.
Mancini, Secret Love, Doris Day's hit from 1954, Amazing Grace, the alma mater from the University of South Carolina, Go Cox,
You had to get that in there, didn't you?
Charlie Parker, and Simple Gifts. And I haven't left the notes from the tube, right?
Wow. Fabulous. Fabulous.
So instead of trying to hear 12 pitches or trying to hear intervals, try to find the home pitches that so many tunes are based on, which is
Yeah.
physics. It's
Yeah.
not because some theory teacher said we need to learn these notes.
Right.
This is physics that I take it to any continent on the planet and it will still ring those same pitches.
Yeah.
The trumpet rings in those pitches, strings vibrate harmonically on those pitches.
Right.
So I can start there. If I can hear these pitches, I can probably hear that pitch because it wants to point here.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Kind of limited that note. I know where it wants to go because I know where these primary pitches are. So
Yeah.
I break it into primary pitches, which are physics, diatonic pitches, which point back to their
Yeah.
tertiary pitches or that want to point either right back.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Right.
Well, there's some chromatic notes, but
Yes.
they point back to the primary pitches. So if you're
Yeah.
trying to hear 12 pitches, that's a chore.
It's a chore.
I'm trying to hear 3 and then hear the pitches that point back to it.
Yeah.
You want to know something else about this? If I play just these pitches and I play Twinkle, the pitches that point back, that points, I'm in F here. This points to F. That points. If I add up all the pitches that point to F melodically, not harmonically,
Right.
I end up getting that G minor triad or a C triad, the 2 and the 5.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, it's not a chicken and egg thing, which came first, the chords or the
Right.
it's the melodies. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. Right. Yeah,
Back when I
absolutely.
was playing with Bach, we did not have chord changes.
Right. Right.
So that's the way I'm going to break down ear training is we're going to find 3 pitches first.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Now the tube sales at Lowe's and Home Depot are going to go up significantly later.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thing: you have to cut them the right length. Like I have when I'm working with string players, we were playing the key of G, so I have a length that's in G. This was in F for when I'm playing with horn players because they like the flat keys. And you can stretch it and kind of tune it if you.
You're cracking me up, man. Oh, that's funny. Okay, how about this one?
Okay.
Here's one that I think gets ignored way, way, way too much. The importance of history.
Yeah. I have another one over here I'm going to get to that I think is really important if you let me.
Oh, I sure will.
History, boy. I was my study of history was not such a I didn't do it right. When I first started playing piano, the first records I got were Mild Smiles. Can you imagine starting there? Like,
wow. Yeah, you skipped a lot of stuff there, man.
Well, I mean, it was the mid 60s or 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
And someone handed me that record and
Yeah,
Herbie Hancock was so confused about what to play that he didn't even play sometimes.
Right.
I've actually talked to him about this,
Oh, wow.
and he goes, man, I told Miles I didn't know what to play. And Miles said, then don't play. And so he left big blanks. And sometimes he's just playing with his right hand because he wasn't sure what to do in chord. This is Herbie Hancock and he's a genius.
Oh, my
So I
goodness.
kind of had to
Right.
work my way back, to Red Garland. And I'm from Dallas and I didn't know Red Garland,
You're right. Oh, my goodness. Right.
And well, he had moved back kind of after this period, but, and, Wynton Kelly and Bud and of course, Bill. I mean, but I kind of had to work my way back through history to find these things. Um, um, so yeah, it's important to know where you're coming from. And I still look back at some of those players from the early jazz days and think, man, we are not worthy, you know,
Correct.
you
Right.
know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and
I,
and then as a classical piano player, which I was for a while there, you know, just how much there is to learn from that history too. So it didn't start with Bud Powell
right.
or Ted,
Right. That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Right. And I tend to think that, the study of history is actually a pretty darn good um, blueprint,
Mhm.
right? A developmental blueprint for us as musicians. So I try to encourage my students to get very comfortable with history, to go back to the early jazz fathers, if you will,
Right, right.
and begin listening and listen forward and keep listening forward, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, okay, um, improvisation. Somebody wants to learn how to improvise. How do they begin?
Um, I'm going to go back to the tube again.
Okay.
And I'm really serious because if they can find those notes on their instrument, they've got under their fingers literally thousands of melodies, folk songs, Christmas songs,
Correct. Right.
standards like I've just played.
Right.
Don't you wanna run for me? They're all right here.
Right there. Right.
Days of Wine and Roses, Twinkle Twinkle, and it
Right.
gives them a simple framework to just go like, I'm not going to worry about chord changes. I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm just going to try to create some melodies. I'm going to try to
Correct.
play a folk song that no one's ever heard before, but it has the components of these things, and
Correct.
then step from there. So that's where I'm going to start. You know, and
Right.
I've taught Suzuki camps where my
Okay.
advanced
Sure.
improv
Sure.
were a bunch of 11-year-old kids, and
Right.
and we improvised there based on Twinkle or the songs in the Twinkle book. The
Right.
first,
Right.
and they play around the melody. And they've played Clementi, and they've played Bach, and they've played some Mozart sonatina things, and they are able to incorporate some of that vocabulary because like they've played it before.
Right.
So they'll add things that you don't even have to suggest to do. There's no reason they can't even play some chromatic notes because they can
Right.
hear White Christmas or the little
Right.
town of Bethlehem. They're chromatic notes there,
Right.
and they can hear where they want to point. So fundamentally, still back to the tube, and then all the harmony comes off that tube anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep with that. I mean, because I could get really deep with that, but
Yeah,
you know,
and well, too, with the improv and the ear training, kind of, linking those two together. Quite often students, I think, have, it's kind of an intimidating thing for a lot of students. The ear. They whether they hear things or and I always encourage them. I always go like, look, you have great ears. You have great ears, and you're going to be able to pick this up quickly if you exercise those ears. And they go, well, how do you know I have good ears? And I always go like, well, look, I'm going to test you. I'm going to say something, and you won't even have to hear. You don't have to hear. You don't have to have that sound here present to hear it. You'll just hear it. And they go, okay. I go, dog barking. And they all smile and they go, yes, I hear a dog bark. I said, you don't need a dog here, right? You hear dog barking.
yeah,
And they go, yes. I go, now I'm going to even be even more specific. Tiny dog barking.
yeah.
How
I see where
about big dog barking, right? That if they can differentiate, my point being is if you can differentiate between daily sounds that you hear daily, that if you dive in musically, you can start differentiating and hearing musical sound.
Right. I'll take that analogy back to even pitches then. Now you're trying to have them imagine a sound, but even a musical sentence could be that dog
Correct.
barking idea. So dog and bark, right? all those notes are just a way of describing the dog. All those ways are describing how he's barking, right?
You're right.
Right. So
You're right.
there I'm
That's awesome.
embellishing like two notes. I'm only thinking of two notes or only thinking of one note, but how do I want to say that one note? I want to say it like that. I want to say it like this.
Like
See?
that, right?
And all I'm thinking is just F or something.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I'm starting them with the tube. Even my college kids, I still go back to that business because that's where Charlie Parker started his solo on. So if it's good enough for him, it's going to work
good
for
enough,
us.
right? No doubt.
If we are really getting like a step or two deeper, we're having to deal with chord changes, and we are in jazz. We have to deal with like secondary keys almost right off the bat.
Correct. Right.
So a lot of people are worried about all of the notes that they have to worry about when it reaches that secondary key.
Right.
And usually there is one and possibly two pitches that they need to worry about and not a whole scale.
Yeah. Right.
So what I mean, now that you ask. So that's C major going to an E7 chord. Well, E7 is not in the key of C, right?
Right.
So what do I do?
Right.
Oh my God, what key are we in? Well, we're just going pointing to A minor for a minute. So
right.
just relax.
Right. Right.
One note changes.
Right.
And that's the guy you should aim for. That's like the doorway to this room.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
And then the next chord, well, it's an A7. Well, A7 is pointing to D minor. There's two notes that differentiate the key of C major, which is no sharps and flats.
Right.
E minor, which is one flat.
Right.
Old school notation,
Right. Right. Right.
So I got to get one flat in there and also have to get the leading tone.
Correct.
So and then everybody, they know where that's going to come. And if I'm an improviser and I want you to hear D minor and I've got a bass player playing the D, what is one note that's going to do it? I got 12 pitches, but one note. I don't want to play a D. The bass player's got that. An A, ambiguous.
Right.
In fact, if I play an A, I'm probably going to hear an F sharp ringing in the air.
Correct. Right.
I'm going to play an F.
Correct.
Right? So these are not like artistic choices as much as those are the doorways. Right. This is what those symbols mean up there. Find that one pitch that works.
Yeah, right. Very good.
You can find a million ways to get there.
Yeah, that's very good. Yes.
So I'm looking for this one pitch at a time kind of things that really identify it. And then I make an artistic decision. How do I want to get there?
Right.
Or do I want to give it to you right when you expect it? Or do I want to hide it and make you wait for it and go, that was
there. Yeah, there it is. Right.
That's the art.
Yeah, that is. Right.
But, D major has an F sharp. That's not art. That's just fact.
That's musical fact.
Yeah.
All right. So awesome. What about, how about transcriptions? You hear people talk about transcriptions all the time. What are do's and don'ts of transcriptions? Because there are do's and don'ts to approaching transcriptions. What are they?
Well, I hope I get them right. It seems like you know what you want me to say.
Well, I know what I would say, but I'm curious what you would say.
All right. The first thing you need to do is try to find the most difficult solo you can possibly imagine that goes on for 7 minutes and transcribe every note. No.
That's not what I would say.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What I meant to say was that's where a lot of people think they have to start.
That's well, exactly, right?
So I tell a kid, you've been listening to a record for a while, and there's probably one line you just like, you can't live without.
Right.
Oh, man, that is so cool. That's the line to transcribe. It may be 2 measures, it may be 4 measures long. Don't worry about the whole record or the whole side, but that's the one that attracts you. And that is also kind of reflective of what maybe your musical voice is, because that line attracts you. I may listen to that same recording and be attracted to this line over here.
Correct.
Right.
Something totally different.
These little fragments. And from that little fragment, it's like digging up pottery, archaeological pottery, right? I don't know the whole civilization, but maybe I can kind of figure out some things from just this little fragment instead of digging up everything. So from this little fragment, which, well, in that the one I've already used is that Charlie Parker example, I found the notes of the tube. I found that I used some chromatic notes to get to the notes of the tube. Well, that is going to do me more good than trying to transcribe 128 measures of Clifford Brown at 300.
Correct. Right.
So I could take that little idea I'm presuming this is the Parker thing I was doing, and put it in every key. I can figure out, well, will it work in minor? Will it work, upside down?
Right.
Oh, in fact, as it does. So, so then I've taken one day, I've transcribed one measure of music and practiced it upside down and backwards. Now,
Yeah.
what am I doing?
Yeah. All in an effort to discover you.
Right, exactly. And what have I done? I've not only developed my technique on the instrument because I'm playing in many keys and practicing chops. This is way more fun than just practicing up and down the scales now. I'm practicing a little motive idea. And by extracting what I think it means, I'm learning how to develop a musical idea
Correct.
separate from I'm going to plug in this lick every time blues comes up.
See, that's just it, right? There's where
So,
I'm getting at. A lot of times, so many people approach transcription as I'm going to learn a lick that I can drop kick into Days and Wine of Roses, and I go like, good luck with that.
yeah.
You
Well,
good luck with that.
but I do think sometimes that maybe is a part of the process, maybe not on the gig, but as a part of a process to drop kick these transcriptions into a lot of tunes so you can see kind of like how it works. And also they'll find out that just knowing they're going to drop kick it into this tune is not so easy
It's
because they
not.
usually wait until the end of four to start thinking about what they want to play on one. But that also teaches them something. So I think
Right.
there's some good in trying to plug it in some kind of way. But I think there's also a good thing. So to summarize, I'm going to transcribe something exactly. I'm going to transcribe it literally, but then I'm going to transcribe it conceptually. What's going on here?
That's right. That's
Charlie
right.
Parker is playing an arpeggio with some
That's
chromatic
right.
passing tones to get to it. That is
Right.
even a bigger process,
No doubt. And
and it
and
stretches like this. And
right.
I can't play without plugging those ideas in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I always just try to encourage students that really the study of transcriptions is the journey to discover you.
yeah,
It's don't get it turned around that you're trying to discover Bill Evans. You're going
yeah,
to use Bill Evans to discover you,
yeah,
and and um, and I think if you approach it that way, it's kind of like I had a teacher one time say to me, Bob, you this was funny because I was just a kid and my heart sunk to my feet. He said, Bob, he goes, you will, because he wanted me to transcribe, he wanted me to look at some Oscar Peterson stuff, right? And I said, I don't, and I was going like, I don't know, I don't want to end up sounding like Oscar Peterson. And he cracked up laughing and he goes like this. He goes, Bob, I want to tell you right now. He said, you will never ever sound like Oscar Peterson. And my heart sunk to my feet. But here's what he said that was so beautiful right afterwards. And he said, and Bob, he said, Oscar Peterson will never ever sound like you.
there you go.
So this is about finding you,
Yeah.
you know.
I will say, as an academically oriented person, I've transcribed a lot of complete solos.
Right.
And the advantage to that, after transcribing bits and pieces that are really attractive and trying to develop them on your own, is that you get to see kind of how Dexter Gordon, Bill Evans, or Charlie Parker develop an idea over a whole framework. And then
Right.
sometimes it's not always about these specific notes, but kind of the gestures that they're making, or they're
Right.
playing a lot of really fast notes here, and it's really specific to the harmony. They're not playing fast notes, and that's not very specific to the harmony. How this kind of works together to tell a whole story.
Right. Right.
And I'm going to tell you too, I've transcribed like, what is the tune? How My Heart Sings, for instance. That
Mm-hmm.
Bill
Yep.
Evans recorded that
Right.
several times. So
Right.
I've set about to transcribe every time he plays it that I have a
Wow.
recording of. Now, the purpose, I'm not learning a whole lot new about how to play this tune, but it's interesting to me, just academically, is just to line it up and see
Right.
his structure. And he doesn't always, on any tune, play the same changes. In fact, because I have other tunes that I've transcribed, and I have like
Wow.
8 versions of his harmony. So when people go, those aren't the right changes to a tune, I pull this out and I go, this is Bill Evans playing this one tune. And every time he chooses a different harmonic path.
I hate Bill Evans.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. And but it's also interesting to me academically, maybe, to see how much of the same material he has worked out.
Right.
And this is kind of the kind
Yeah,
of
that's
thing I'm
good.
going to do in these measures, and this is the kind of thing I'm going to do in that second chorus that really makes it climactic. And then you hear the one recording where he just screwed it up. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
All due respect to Bill, but some of those nights, uh, bad substances were getting in the way, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And you
Right.
could tell that maybe some substance abuse had kind of taken over, and he got things out of order. And he
Right.
went to the second chorus idea way too early, and there was nothing left. And it was,
Oh boy.
I don't really mean to bring that up. Except that's a don't.
Right. That's a don't. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
but it is interesting to me at this point to kind of look and see what was alike and what was different and how it
Yeah.
developed over years.
That's very fascinating. I've done that with students, like using like a recording of Oscar Peterson playing Sweet Georgia Brown in
Mhm.
1970, him playing Sweet Georgia Brown in 1980, him playing Sweet Georgia Brown in 1990, and seeing and hearing the
Yeah,
similarities, how much of this is how Oscar Peterson plays Sweet Georgia Brown. This is
right.
how he likes to approach this
Yeah,
tune.
it'd be hard to even get to the second recording because after one, I kind of want to quit piano.
Right. It's so true, man. So true. Okay, here is maybe the toughest one of the day, and it's the last one. This is
I
it.
got one in case this is not the one.
Okay, well let's go to yours real quick.
I think accompanying is the
Oh,
thing that gets talked about the least of all, and it's the thing we do 100% of the time.
yes. Yes, that's
I'm on a
right. We
gig,
do.
I'm accompanying I even accompany drum solos. I feel
Yeah,
like the drummer's got to keep the form, and there's certain kicks and things in the tune
correct. Right.
that I want to come together. Most of my drummers really like it. We set this stuff up even in their drum
Right.
solos.
Right.
When it comes to the piano solo, I'm accompanying myself.
Right.
So I think that
That's right.
we could probably spend, as far as I'm concerned, like a whole session just talking about
I'm going to have you know what?
accompanying.
I'm going to have you back on. We're going to talk about that's going to be the topic.
All right, so I'll leave it at that, and I will really
Yeah.
address that because I have very specific things to say about
Yeah.
accompanying.
Yeah, I'm going to have you back. We're going to set up a date after we get done with this one, and I because that is fascinating. I think you're right. That is totally that's so much neglected that in fact you don't even hear anybody talk about it.
Right.
You
So I'd
know,
be happy to do that.
that'd be awesome, Bert.
And
Okay, the last one that I had, the last one I had is the abstract concept. It's not really abstract, but it's hard. Time, time. Yes. Should we
oh,
set up
that's never
another?
come up.
Should we set up another episode for that? Time. So do's and don'ts. Some pearls of wisdom from Bert to Jazz Piano Skills listeners about time, the awareness of time, the development of time, the practicing of time.
Yeah. Everything that has to do with music has to do with time, even pitches.
Hmm. Hmm.
That pitch is defined by how many times it vibrates a second. I
Correct.
know that's abstract, but
Right.
and music only happens in time. It's like there's a beginning and it happens over time. The we can talk about harmony all day long, but harmony dictates how we feel a time,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I'm in 3/4 without a conductor being there because
Right.
I'm
Right.
playing the chords every 3 beats. You feel
Right.
this event happen every 3 beats. If
Right.
I take harmony and I just say, oh, it's 1, 6, 2, and 5, and just mix them in any kind of order, we don't get a sense of time. You
Right.
put them in the right order, and in this phrase, one feels like it's here, this feels like it's here. It
Right.
sets up the feel of the music, and
Right.
these are bigger pictures of time.
Right.
I think about the form of a tune as when we talk about subdivision, we usually talk about like eighth notes being subdivided in a quarter. It's like I
Right.
talk about the tune. This is A. This is beat 3 of the tune.
Right.
And if I walk into a
Very
club
good.
and they're playing rhythm changes, I can tell that they're on the second A section
Right.
because these guys are playing it different than they play it here or here.
Yeah. So good.
And so 8 measure phrases feel like different beats to a more
Yes.
a mature player. We sense this. We're not just
Right.
playing in this measure or something.
Correct.
So before we even get to eighth notes, we're looking at bigger things. And then the eighth note, boy, that's the hardest thing in the world. It's the last thing to come. A guy can understand a Superlocrian scale long before they
Yeah.
really get maybe the time
Per-
feel. I'm still working on time feel. I'm
correct.
still
Yeah.
very
Right.
critical of how I establish the time, Man, you just opened a big can of worms here, man.
Sorry.
Um,
Well, you be thinking about that because we should have an episode on time too,
yeah,
man.
yeah,
We'll do an episode on time.
yeah. So, what's that practice time? You talked a minute ago about having them not play with their left hand and just playing
Yeah.
melodies.
Right.
There's another exercise I thought of at the time is I tell them to put something in their hand over here and play the whole tune and just accompany themselves first. Just
Yes.
practicing. Like if this guy's not giving me the time, not much this is going to do to help.
That is
But
correct.
I play really slow. People have talked about that. I practice really slowly. If I'm going to play rhythm changes, we played a gig the other night and we were playing Cherokee because it was a Charlie
boy.
Parker tribute
Right.
at like 3:20. That's just brisk, man. But I practice this stuff painfully slow, like maybe at 60,
Yeah.
like where
Right.
it's almost like the Matrix where everything's in slow motion.
Right.
But I
Right.
want to feel like the kind of way things feel. And, so I
Right.
practice at different tempos. I
Right.
practice slowly. I'm very critical of how these notes feel. I
Right.
think it's the time feel of jazz has less to do with like if a note is swinging or whether who's getting the accent and who's louder and who's softer. This has a lot more to do with feel than anything else. I'm just
Right.
kind of like hitting these high points of things. So you could play a line and play all the notes correctly, and it's not going to sound like Oscar Peterson because
Right.
Oscar's he's accented, he's hammering the snot out of some of those notes, and some of those notes are like not even really there, and that's what makes it feel so good. That's that time
Right.
feel that he's got.
Right. Right.
A long time ago, a classical piano player told me that he thought he knew someone who could play all that Oscar stuff without all the accents, and I'm going, oh, oh. So he completely missed the point. It was as if it all had to be like there was some flaw in the magic because he was accenting polyrhythms and stuff. No. So yeah, I
Wow.
work on time. I practice with a metronome. There are times in lessons we work on
Yeah.
actually beating rhythms
Right.
and
Right.
feeling two pulses, and we'll have to stop playing piano and play pat a cake for a while to
Right.
really get the sense of where these things happen
Right.
without
Right.
thinking about notes. We, with the more mature players, where we're talking about how to punctuate the form rhythmically, so we know
Right.
where we are. So it just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like just a bunch of A's.
Correct. Right. That's a great point, right? We should be able to, with mature players, you should be able to walk into the room and know exactly where in the form they are.
Yeah, because you walk in a room, the concert band's playing, you know where beat one is without looking at
Yep.
the conductor because the music doing
Correct.
something that does that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
there's
It's
so much. When
yeah.
I'm transcribing those excerpts, that's the other thing to try to get is like, how are they playing?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just a matter of lining up the eighth notes and playing
Yeah.
them in the right order.
Yeah.
Like one of them's going to get an accent and one of them's maybe not. One of them's going to
Yeah.
get slurred and one of them's going to get, not. If I'm transcribing sax or trumpet player, they're tonguing that. How do I translate that to the piano?
Oh, right. Exactly
'Cause
right.
there's no such thing as legato where either a hammer
Yeah.
hit a string or it
Right.
didn't.
Right.
But we
That's
have to
right.
fake it and make you a sense that we're breathing these.
Correct.
you
That's
know,
that's what's challenging about the piano, right?
Yeah.
It's I tell students all the time it's probably the least intimate instrument we have. I mean, it's a box, right, with buttons on it that you're pushing. It's not like a sax player who actually puts something into his mouth. That's pretty darn intimate, right?
Yeah. And what's great about sax? Not much, but no. I'm sorry, the joke. It was just sitting there.
Right. It was
What they have is they are actually breathing into their instrument.
correct.
And that gives it such a human thing that piano players sometimes will miss because we're really just making hammers hit strings.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Right.
It's
So,
just
so sometimes I really make them sing,
right.
and breathe. People in the improv class years ago, they go, every time before you start a line, you take a breath.
Yes.
I go, yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing this. I'm,
Right. You're breathing.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's fabulous. So,
You asked me
look,
some good questions, and I'm going to update all my answers and post it online later.
okay, great. Well, speaking of online, where can jazz piano students go to learn more about you? I know it's bertligon.com, right?
BertLigonMusic.com.
Oh, Bert Ligon Music, bertligonmusic.com. And
Yeah.
you have resources there, your books, links to get your books. There are links to, I think you have etudes for students to access, to purchase and to utilize in practicing. What else can they find there?
I've written a lot of music for different ensembles. So there are links about big band charts and a lot of string ensemble stuff because there was a niche for that. People weren't
Right.
getting that. So there's probably links to some of the university sites where I have 1,000 transcriptions up,
Okay.
that I've done or my students have done.
Fantastic.
And other things. And I'm the kind of guy, if you have a question, email me I'll answer it at 1:30 in the morning sometimes, I literally get emails from all over the world and they're always surprised that I'm answering them back, like they'll ask me some question on page 37 of the book, you say this, but I don't know what you mean, or what record does that lick from, and I'll answer them back and, like 1:30 in the morning, they're going like, what?
Bert never sleeps, man. Bert, you've never slept. I don't think you've slept since 1984, man.
No,
85.
man, no. No, I tell you, I haven't slept. I used to throw the Dallas Morning News paper out when I was 12.
Okay, there you go. See?
And I've not slept well since then. I was getting up at 2:00 in the morning.
The old paper route, man. I had a morning paper route too, but mine was up in the Chicago area, man. It was cold. It was cold.
You win.
Yeah, I win there. I win that one, man. So BertLigonMusic.com. I can't encourage all you Jazz Piano Skills listeners, check it out. If you are not familiar with Bert Ligon, you need to be familiar with Bert Ligon immediately. Get to his website, check out his books, his materials. It's a resource, a wealth of information that is at your fingertips, ready to help you with your jazz journey in becoming an accomplished jazz pianist and becoming an accomplished musician, period. So check out BertLigonMusic.com. Bert, what a joy it has been to spend time with you and to talk music. I literally, we could do this all day long.
Yep.
All day long. It's been a joy, and I'm going to have you back on, man. We're going to set up a date to have you back on to discuss some of these topics, especially the accompaniment. That is fabulous. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Thank you, sir.